Today I want to talk about changing negative attitudes. A really good friend of mine, his name is Andy Smith. I've known him and I know him only through business for many years, and now they've moved to Tennessee and we go visit them quite often. But I do know the date that this message was born was on July 4th this year. We went to their house to go swimming. And Andy is a vice president of sales, and the industry he is in is home health and hospice. Anybody work in that industry? If you're a home health nurse or a hospice nurse, you have a difficult job. You see a lot of bad situations. You work a lot of hours and probably don't get paid for all the hours you do work. But when Andy just took a new job this summer as the vice president of sales of a new company, and he said the first thing he does is he shows this video that I'm going to start with. And the reason is this video talks about not bringing your negative attitudes to work. Because in the home health and hospice industry, and I know this because I used to recruit salespeople in that industry for a long time, the salespeople think the nurses aren't doing enough, and the nurses think the salespeople don't do anything but run around in a car and talk to people. He tries to attack that the first day he's there, and he tells me he starts with this video every time. So let's start with a video. This is a man named Zig Ziglar. Who's heard of him? He's one of the great motivational speakers of the last 30, 40 years. He's passed away now. But he teaches people how to overcome. He's sort of a self-help purveyor. But let's start with this little video here.
Got a phone call from a lady in Birmingham, Alabama. At the end of the conversation, she said, Zig, she said, I believe this woman thinks she's got an impossible problem, but I believe you can solve that problem with her in just a few minutes if you will spend that time with her. I said, well, Laurie, tell her to meet me backstage. I'll get there about 10 minutes early. My schedule was such that was about all I had. Well, I got there, and I was on backstage behind the curtain on one side. She spotted me from the other side, and as she walked across the stage, I have never seen as much anger in a human being in my life as I saw in her. She almost started crying when she saw me. She said, oh, I'm just so glad to see you. I got this horrible job. I hate it. I hate everything about it. I hate everybody down there. I mean, you talking about negative nails. She was it. She said, can you help me? Now, understand, I've only got about 10 minutes. So I looked at her, and one thing I have learned, I don't do counseling, but I talk with a lot of people who do, in psychology, psychiatry, and the ministry. And they tell me that everybody who comes to you with a problem are not necessarily looking for a solution. I couldn't understand that for a long time. Why do they bring you a problem if they don't want to solve it? Well, I can tell you why. They want to tell you about it, you about it, you about it, you about it, and you about it. And if you foul up the deal and solve the problem, they can't tell you again, you again. They want the attention that goes with the problem, and every company just about it has that kind of an individual. They want the attention that goes with griping and complaining. Well, I looked at the lady, and it wasn't unkindly, but firmly I said to her, yes, and you know, ma'am, I'm afraid your problem is about to get worse. She said, what do you mean? I said, I believe they're going to fire you. She was stunned. I couldn't have stunned her more if I'd hit her in the face with a bucket of ice water. She said, fire me? Why on earth would they fire me? The inflection in her voice clearly said, they're the bad guys, I'm the good guy. Why don't they fire them and keep me? Have you ever noticed that people who are the problem never recognize that they are? They're in complete denial. They think denial is just a river in Egypt. Why would they fire me? I said, ma'am, I don't believe there's a company in America big enough to contain this much poison in one small spot.
Okay, Zig is talking about a business situation. And some of you may work with a person like this. Some of you may be this person at your job. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Who thinks that her job was the absolute worst job on earth? Anybody raise your hand? Okay, who thinks she might be the problem at her place of business? And Zig says to her, no company can take this much poison in one small space. But we're not talking about business today. What are we talking about? We're talking about our church family. We're talking about our family at home. And we're talking about me and you as individuals. And that's what I want us to think about. And he says, have you ever noticed the people who are the problem never know they are? They think everybody else is. So we're going to take stock today and be honest with ourselves, and we're going to start thinking, am I part of the problem? In any bad relationship you have, even if the other person's horrible, you're still part of the problem, because how you react to their horrible is whether it gets worse, stays the same, or gets better. I've got a situation I'm dealing with right now. I'm a recruiter, as I said before. I don't do home health and hospice recruiting anymore. I do manufacturing and engineering. I've got a plant manager of a brand new Toyota feeder plant down in Alabama that I went in there when they didn't even have their machine set up yet, and I started recruiting for them. All the engineers and people I placed for them within the next couple of years were calling me back, asking me if I could help them find a new job. I said, did you get fired? No, I can't work for the plant manager there anymore. The guy's horrible. Well, sometimes somebody taught me a long time ago, take everything you hear from people with a grain of salt, especially in recruiting. So I kind of, okay. Well, then when enough people came to me, now I know who the problem is. It's the guy. And then I had a meeting with him face to face, and it proved what I already thought. I don't recruit for them anymore. So I'm recruiting for another plant manager just about an hour north of them in Tennessee right now, and the new vice president of operations said, here's why I'm getting rid of the guy. I visited the plant. We went out on the floor. He did not know his employees, didn't know their names, had no interest in who they were as long as they did what he told them to do. And he said that is not leadership. Well, I've got a guy in there right now, hopefully, who's taking his place. And his whole idea, listen to the difference. He's at a new plant, ironically, another Toyota feeder plant. They make gas tanks. He said, when I got here in the same town where this other job is, they had lost so many employees because of a negative working environment. But he said, my goal when I come to a plant is to get to know every employee. He said, I walk the floor every morning. I know everybody's name. I know if their child had a Little League baseball game last night, and I ask them how it went. I know their wife. I know their name. When it's their birthday, they have a cake waiting for them at work when they get there, and every employee in the factory gets a piece. Got their name on it. Happy birthday, Jim. Happy birthday, Trina. So he said when it's their anniversary, I give them a $50 gift card so they can take their wife or husband out to dinner. He said in a year and a half that there are people calling him now going, I left there a year or two ago because it was such a bad place to work. Can I come back? One human being in two different plants made all the difference. And what was the difference? They cared about people. As I have recruited for this one plant manager job to replace the bad, every new person I've talked to on the phone, I said, tell me about your management style. And I heard so many stories about like what this guy said, where I walk the floor every morning. If somebody needs to take a break, I run their machine for them while they go take a break. I let them see that there's no job in this factory too dirty that I won't do it. And my people like working for me. Another thing a guy said that really touched me, I'll never forget this. He said, I go to every employee. I say, that table you're working on next to your machine, is it too high? Is it too low? If I lowered it or raised it, would it make your job easier? You do this job 8 to 10 hours a day. What can I do to make it easier on you? Could I put a water cooler closer to you so you don't have to take a break and walk all the way across the factory? Little things like that. Well, this is all business, but we're all in business. We have jobs, but we also run a business in our home. And you're the plant manager, you're the quality manager, or you're one of the employees if you're a child. And your job is to make yourself help the other people in that company to function better, and you do that by caring about them and having a relationship with them. I saw this sign just this week, and I think this was meant by God for me to see it. What would your church be like if everyone in it was just like you? Think about that for a minute. Do I come and complain that sermon wasn't up to par? I don't like the way the snacks are done, but I never bring a snack, but I don't like what everybody else brings. Are you part of the positive in your church? Or are you part of the negative? And I want you to think about that. And you know, we're here for a short time, 20 plus minutes here for a few minutes. I want you to think about these things as the months go and as the weeks go and on your drive home, because these are serious issues. We are on the precipice of what could be some harder times for us here, and it's time to get right with God. And getting right with God means that you get right with the people around you, because we're supposed to be a light, and people are supposed to see Jesus Christ living through us. So, as I said, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? All sin begins in the mind. That's a scriptural idea. Even Jesus said, if you look at this woman lustfully, or if you hate this person, then you've murdered them. It's all in your mind. Well, that's what bad attitudes is. And part of bad attitudes that leads to sin, if you think you're better than other people, or those people over there look different than me, and you're judging everybody you come in contact with, can you witness to a human being that you've already written off in your mind that is not a good person? No. The only way to affect other people is to what? Care about them and to develop a relationship with them. And just because they don't look the same as you, something you've got to really think about is, praise God if you were raised in a godly family with mama and daddy who tried to follow the scriptures, who tried to teach you right from wrong, because you are a strange animal in today's world. And I mean that. More people now are raised in families that don't know God than do. They don't even know right from wrong. My son Eli just started a mentorship program at GE Appliances in Decatur, and he was kind of upset after the first week of their orientation. He said, Dad, all they're trying to do is teach us the difference between right and wrong. Because most of their new employees who are 17, 18, 20, 25 years old don't know right from wrong. They don't know how to react to their superiors. They don't know how to treat their peers. They don't know how to not lie. They don't even know how to show up to work every day. So they're being told for an entire week what my son has hopefully learned in our home. But if you have a little compassion on the people you run into in the world, you won't judge them so quickly. And my wife pointed something out to me the other day when we were talking about my sermon. She said, the reason that the Israelites didn't go into the promised land, anybody want to say? Complaining. That was their sin, complaining. They complained about everything. Boy, we missed that food back in Egypt. So God gives them manna. After a little while, manna wasn't good enough. What'd they want? Quail. God got so mad, he said, I'm going to give you quail, and you're going to eat it till it comes out your nostrils. So I think God has a little bit of a sense of humor, but he'd had enough. He'd had enough of the complaining. These people had just seen Egypt, the greatest empire on the earth, destroyed. I don't know the length of time that it took those 10 plagues to make Pharaoh let them go, but they had seen all that. And then they are standing at the edge of the ocean. This is a great time to think about this. We're going to leave here. We're all going to walk out and stand at the edge of the ocean. And the American military is going to start coming at us with tanks, helicopters, jet fighters, and we have nowhere to go. Now, the Red Sea is not nearly as large as this ocean out here, but you can't see the other side. And if you can't see the other side, it doesn't matter if it's Lake Superior, the Gulf of Mexico, or the Red Sea, you have nowhere to go. Even if we had a few boats and we got into them, we're not going to make it far, because arrows will go a pretty good distance, and so will spears. That ocean opened up and they went through it dry shod. And just days later started the mumbling and grumbling. They didn't think the God who could do that could feed them and give them water in the desert. And as an American, you have it so much better than the rest of the world. You have almost nothing to complain about. And yet we're probably the grumblingest people on the face of the planet. Let's go to the book of Titus. We're going to go to chapter 3. And the context here is that Paul has sent Titus to Crete, and he's setting up churches and he's ordaining elders there. I want to look at the example of what he tells these people to do. What is important in Paul's mind that these people understand? In Titus 3:1, he tells them to remind them to be subject to rulers and authorities. So in other words, if you've got somebody over you, you honor them. and you are a good employee, you're a good whatever you are, you know where honor is deserved and you give it, even if they're not good people. To obey and be ready for every good work. And this is so important, verse 2. To speak evil of no one. And you know, when you speak evil of other people, did you say that before you thought that? No. You thought bad about that person before you ever said it to somebody else. So this is about learning to control how we think about others as well. He tells them to be peaceable, gentle, showing all humility to all men. For we ourselves were also once foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving various lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful and hating one another. Ken Swiger used this scripture the other day, and I'm like, he stole my scripture. But he was more looking at the washing that Jesus Christ did at the bottom there in verses 4 and 5. And I'm talking about how we should behave toward others, speaking evil of no one. Even when we don't sin, we're not doing things that break the 10 Commandments. Even those of us who live like that, we still can tend to look down on others and to speak evil of others, right? And it's real easy to think something bad about somebody else in your mind because nobody else knows it. But you know it, and who else knows it? So let's start capturing the bad thoughts while they're still in here before they come out of our mouth. And let's see, and you're going to see in this video, the change that happened in this woman's life when she took his advice. He tells her she's going to be fired, and she's shocked, right? Why would they fire me? I'm the best employee down there. And he says, again, people who are the problem never know they are. That plant manager of that plant in North Alabama has lost very good engineers. And I know they're very good. Not only did I place them and get to know them and know their background, but I know that when they went to the next plant, they got promoted because the next group realized what a talent they had. He's lost all those people. He's lost his tooling manager. He's lost his quality manager. And several other people I don't even know because he's impossible to work for. He cusses at people in meetings. He points out their faults in front of others instead of taking them aside and saying, hey, yesterday you should have done this, but you did. He makes fun of you in front of other people. Nobody wants to work with or for somebody like that. But he's hurting himself because his productivity numbers for his corporate office cannot be good because he's constantly replacing his talent. Zig says in this video, and we're not going to watch it, but he says, do you realize when somebody thinks they're going to lose something, even something they've been complaining about, whether it be a job, a house, a car, a spouse, or anything like that, it takes on brand new value. So right after he tells her they're going to fire you, she's like, whoa, what can I do to save my job? I guess she respects him enough, she thinks he might be right. And he gives her the formula. He asked her to do something. He said, I want you to tell me some things you do like about your job or about the people you work down there. And she bows up like a snake, as I like to say, and says, well, that's easy. I don't like nothing about that job, and I don't like nothing about those people down there. And so his retort to that, instead of getting into an argument with her, he says, well, do they pay you to work there? Well, yes. Do they pay you well? Yes. Well, would you work there for free? Are you going to work for benevolent reasons? And she says, no, I like being paid. So he says, there's reason number one. Let's write that on our paper. Well, she just stands there and he says to her, ma'am, I've done this for a long time and I know that people who won't take step number one, which is write down, start a list of things you do like about a situation or a person, will never take step number two. So she begrudgingly opens her notebook. And who wants to guess how many things after spending 5 minutes going through it that she liked about her job? Anybody want to throw a number out there? It's 22. Turns out she's paid higher than average for her position. She has a personal parking place. She has her own office. She is in on management decisions. She has a 401k that they give her more than the average company does in their match. She has better insurance than almost any other place around pays, and this list goes on for 22 things. But all she looked at was the negative. She did not take into account the positive. So he then tells her the key here. And this is something I want you to do. If you want to write, and you don't have to write a list today because we don't have the time, write down one thing that is really bothering you right now, whether it's a person or a situation or something back at your church. And when you get out of here, I want you to start making a list of the positives, even if there's only 2 positives. But he then says the key is take that list with you, and before you go to bed at night, you look in the mirror, and he says this is so key. The windows are the eyes to the soul, is what he says. And it's so true. When you know a negative person and you know they don't like you, you can look in their eye, and what do you see? Disdain for you is reflected back on their face. But he says, get in front of this mirror and say, instead of saying like, he says love. I love my job because they pay me. I love my job because they pay me better than average. I love my job because I have a great insurance plan. It also was only 10 minutes from her house, so she had almost no commute. And he says when he sees her 6 months later, she's a different human being and loves working there. And she was like, you got to help me. And he said, ma'am, I can't help anybody. And he says that in this video. He says, I can't change you. I can't change the situation you are in, but I can tell you how to change yourself. We've got to quit having negative attitudes, even if the people we are negative about are evil. Because the negative doesn't do you any good. And you will never witness to a person you have disdain for because you don't care. You'll be like Jonah sitting on the top of the hill waiting for the lightning to come down and kill Nineveh. I don't like those people. They're our enemies. I don't want you to forgive them. Well, we become like that in our hearts if we're not careful. Proverbs 30 and verse 33 says, for as churning cream produces butter, and as twisting the nose produces blood, so stirring up anger produces strife. You know, we tend to think of, as like I said before, sin as an action, but it's also a thought. And even if you don't talk to somebody at your church anymore, and I keep going back to business, but I want us to think about the things we're here dealing with, our religious institutions, our families. If you're so mad at somebody you're not talking to them anymore, or you've given up on them, they see that in your eyes. They see that in your cold shoulder that you give them. Why not go back and try to change things about, I'm going to have a smile on my face when I encounter this person again, and I'm going to see how it changes things. Because he says, I can't change you or them, but I can help you change yourself. In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 9, it says, and everybody knows this scripture, we can read it together, it's very short. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Kurt asked if you wanted to be at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Who raised their hand at that? Who wants to be called a child of God? What does it tell you need to be? Does that mean be a peacemaker only when you did something bad and you need to apologize? Or does it mean to look for situations where you can be a peacemaker even when it's not your own fault? Romans 12:18. If it is possible, and then look at this part of the sentence, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. There are certain situations you can do nothing about. You can only affect the attitude you have, the words that come out of your mouth, and the kind of person you are. I'm going to go back just a little piece in my notes here because I skipped over something. I had to go to the Walmart on Sabbath, and I do not like to shop on the Sabbath. I try to avoid that. But when you need toilet paper and milk, and that's the only way you can eat breakfast, and we won't discuss the toilet paper, I had to go to the store. But I was thinking about my sermon, and I was actually working on it, and I determined when I go in this Walmart, I'm going to have a smile on my face, and I'm going to see how it affects people. And I got so many smiles back and everything, and I had a good attitude. And, you know, sometimes when you're in Walmart, you see some things things people shouldn't be wearing in public. I saw a couple of T-shirts with curse words on them, and instead of thinking, what an idiot, I thought, it's a shame they don't know any better. It's a totally different attitude. Here's where it really paid dividends to me, and really God did this for me so I could share it with you. I get to the line, there's only 2 people, the other line's much longer. Great. Their cart isn't that full, but golly, the lady is sure slow. But I'm here to have a good attitude, so I sat patiently. When I got up there, the lady at the checkout had one arm. How do you think I would have felt if I'd have sat back there and grumbled and complained about how slow she was? But I tried to have a good attitude. It makes all the difference in every situation. And I don't have to feel this small now because I didn't sit back there and grumble and complain. Then I sat while she helped me, trying to help her move the bags as quickly as possible to help her out. And I prayed for her because I can't imagine what going through life like that must be. It's not easy. So look what a little change in our attitude can do. We're not going to get to the next part of the video because I'm just at the end of my time. But I will tell you, it changed that woman's life. And the funny thing she said was, you can't believe how the people down there have changed. You can affect every situation you're in by changing you. Put a smile on your face because people see you grumbling and angry and they don't think you're nice. So, and just to wrap up, we have to be a positive influence in this world if we want to achieve all the goals of wearing the white robe and being at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Let's go home and let's make a list for any bad situation. And sometimes our worst situations are in our own homes. But you can start to fix that by making yourself a better person. Tell ourselves when we're in tough situations that as long as we follow God's path, He's going to get us out of it. Don't mumble and grumble, but know God's teaching me something here. And one thing Zig said I wish we could have seen. He said there are people who are good finders in this world and there are people who are fault finders. And he said, unfortunately, people who are always looking for faults, they do it like they're going to get a reward for finding them. And that is true. There are people who look for the negative in everything. You could hand them a $100 bill, and if it had wrinkles in it, they would complain about it. So those are the kind of things we've got to fix. Let's become grateful children of God who are good finders in other people, and let's change the world. Thank you.